All right, I've got my iPad. Let's rank some knits. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. And today we are taking a step back because I've been knitting for almost 4 years now. I want to zoom out and let's rank these knits. I want to kind of look at all of these in the larger context of each other and try to figure out which are my best knits, which are my worst knits, why, and especially going into the new year now, what does that tell me about what I want to knit going forward? And also, it's just fun. When is it not fun to rank stuff, to make graphs of stuff? Really outing myself as a giant nerd here, but really, I think you probably already knew that. If you didn't, if you're new, hi, hello, welcome, now you know. This is a real time capsule. I am coming to you from the beginning of November because at the time that you are watching this, I have just gotten back from vacation like a day ago. I'm in all likelihood dead on the couch from jet lag. But because I'm recording this in advance, that does mean that it is possible that you may now have seen some finished objects that are not actually going to appear in this, because as of time of recording, the last thing that I've finished is my Rivendell Pullover. So by the time you're seeing this, most likely my Musselburgh hat, I hope my Musselburgh hat's complete because that's supposed to be a Christmas gift. But so if you feel like anything is missing from this ranking video, that would be why. And also because, again, by the time you see this, you will have also seen my everything that I knit this year. I'm going to probably get into a little bit less detail in chatting about my feelings about the more recent knits, because you will have just seen that. If you haven't, you can go watch it here just to keep things from being too repetitive. As for my mug and tea of the day, I'm drinking my usual Sloan Classic Earl Grey out of my mug from Studio 648. Ugh. It's a bang struggle today. Also, to again really lean into the time capsule of it all, my hair has been pressed under a baseball cap for the last several days because it has been the World Series. And I guess suddenly care about baseball. I don't know. You know, halfway through the 10th inning of Game 7, I was like, maybe they should just share the trophy though. Sounds like it's a tie. Apparently that's not how sports work. But all is to say, my bangs have been glued to my forehead and now they don't know how to be doing anything else, so we're just gonna have to bear with it. And then as for what I'm wearing today, this is my Lakes cardigan by Ozetta that I finished knitting this summer, and I have worn this 19 times so far. 18? 19. I've worn this 19 times so far. This cost me 345 Canadian dollars to make, so this one was ouch, but at least I feel like 19 times, considering I only finished this a couple months ago, is pretty good. And honestly, I suspect that there are wears that didn't make it into my wardrobe tracking, just because this is one of those things that I will just throw on randomly as a layer when I get cold throughout the day, so it doesn't always make its way into my outfit as I'm conceiving of it for the day and as I'm likely to remember it to log it. So very possible that it's gotten more than that so far, but for right now it is at 19 wears, which puts our current cost per wear at $18.16. All right, now we've got some knits to rank, but first I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video. Okay, I'm in my office today because that's where I get stuff done, which is exactly what we're doing today with our sponsor, Skillshare. Knowing I had a trip coming up, I was thinking I really love documenting my trips. I really love taking photos that really tell the story, and it would probably be worth me spending a little bit of time investing in just learning to do that a little bit better. I feel like I'm pretty competent with my phone, but there's always more things you can learn, right? So I've been taking Shubham Jain's Skillshare class, iPhone photography for Instagram travel creators, and immediately I learned about a whole feature that I didn't even know existed that gives me so much more control over my framing without having to constantly make sure it's still focusing on the thing that I wanted it to be. I've been playing around with it at home, taking glamour shots of my knitting and of copper, obviously, but I'm so excited to apply what I've learned on my trip. Maybe I'll include some of those photos in the next video after I'm back. So whether you're looking to level up your iPhone photography too, or maybe it's fine art, design, photography, fiber arts, technology, if there's something creative that you want to learn, Skillshare has world-class creative professionals who can help you do it, building your creativity with their expert guidance. If you want to give it a try, the first 500 people to click the link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. First, I think we need to go over the sort of criteria and format for this ranking. How is this going to go down? So first of all, when I was initially thinking of doing a video where I was ranking my knits, I was originally conceiving of this as the traditional tier ranking format, and I wanted to do that. The more I thought about it, how I would actually rank it, what levels of ranking I would have and all these things, it just became kind of evident to me pretty quickly there's just too many different criteria that are kind of pinging around in my head for this, and the idea of distilling it down into this one linear ranked format, I just felt like it wasn't gonna work. I feel like there's too many different things that I'm comparing between different knits, And truthfully, if it wouldn't be an absolute nightmare, I would love to graph these things on like 10 different axes simultaneously. But unfortunately, it's kind of hard to work in 10 dimensions. So we will not be doing that. We will, however, be working in 2. So instead of doing the traditional tier ranking, we're instead going to be doing what I believe is called a scatter plot, if I remember my like 4th grade math correctly. If not, just go with it. Point being, we're gonna have 2 axes, one being the process of knitting and how enjoyable I found that to be, and the other being the finished object and how much I like that, which this is the one where I'm like, I would love to split this into like 7 more axes, because this one encompasses things just like, how do I feel when I look at it, right? Like, do I love it? Do I feel meh about it? But also how like useful is it in my wardrobe, right? Because there are sometimes pieces that we're not the most excited about, but they're extremely utilitarian. And then also just like how much actual wear has it actually gotten, which sometimes is very directly correlated with those first 2 points, but sometimes they're very disconnected from each other, as I think we'll probably see in some of these examples that we're going to get into. So that's sort of the basic criteria that we're going with, and for each pattern I'm going to tell you what it is, who it's by. So most of these patterns are going to be size inclusive because that's generally a criteria that I operate under. However, some of these knits from earlier in my knitting career, like there was a time where that was like not the thing that I was aware was happening. And so there are some patterns that made their way in before that was in place as a criteria for me. So I will try to remember to give a heads up for any patterns that are not size inclusive, just so nobody gets their heart set on anything that they're not actually going to be able to knit. And I'll also go over when I actually finished each piece, so we have some context for how long it's existed in my wardrobe when we're discussing like how much wear it's gotten and things like that. Okay, so to do this actual ranking, I have my iPad here where I've set up my graph that I'm going to be plotting this onto. I will pop this up on the screen so you can actually see it properly and nice and clean, and you will get a much better version of this later that I create in editing than what I'm scribbling right now. Also through my iPad, I can access my wardrobe tracking app, Stylebook, which is where I get all my stats about how often I have worn things and what that means for their cost per wear. So let's dig into this with our first knit, which is, and we're dropping the pencil. Great start. Okay, my first knit, which is the first one that I started knitting, not the first one that I finished, but I think for the purposes of this, it makes more sense to talk about this one first because it's definitely it's the sort of simple beginner project, right, that I embarked upon when I had no skills. So this is this scarf. Now, it's also funny to try to rank this one now because I think my experience of knitting it, like particularly for the process criteria, that will be different now than it was then, because at the time I wasn't like capable of a whole lot. I had just figured out how to not make my test swatches become trapezoids. So very limited skill set. At the time, I did very much enjoy knitting this. And I mean, honestly, maybe I still would, just as sort of a palette cleanser, brain break, except that it's flat. I would much prefer, like the muscle burr that I'm working on right now is also very mindless, but it's stuck in the round, which is different than this. This was not a pattern. I just sort of was like, I will knit some rows and then purl some rows, and it will just kind of be like texturally striped like that. Didn't have anything more in mind than that. I feel like I enjoyed it very much at the time. I feel like it was a good knit for what I needed it to be. Like at the time, I feel like it was like probably like an 8, but okay, this is an important decision I have to make. Am I ranking based on how it felt at the time or upon reflection? Which maybe, like if I want this to be helpful to guide future knit decisions, I should probably be going based more off of how I feel about it now with my current skill set, because it's my current skill set that's going to be knitting future things, or better skill set, hopefully, as I continue to improve. Okay, so I think we'll put that at a 6 for enjoyment. Finished object satisfaction, I cannot get into any like cost per wear or anything like that on this one because this one was gifted away. And I mean, this was, again, I knew virtually nothing at this point. So the purl knit striping worked as an effect for like what it looks like kind of on the front, like down the center of the scarf, but it does kind of do some funny things along the edges where like the knit sections want to curl in on the edges one way and the purls want to like curl the other way. So I didn't know about like ribbing. I had no idea about anything. So as a finished object, this one is like lower for me. This one's probably like a 3 maybe. So that puts that here. Okay, I mean, for my first ever knit project, I feel like that's not bad. I feel like that's not a terrible place to start, but does not hold a candle to the next one, because I feel like this next one, this is a good one. The Iverson Headband by Mookie Crafts. This is the first proper knitting project that I finished. Like, I had done my test swatches, I had done lots of little practice snuffings just to like learn what I was doing and figure out what these weird mistakes were that I was making. So it's not that I picked up a set of needles and immediately knit this beautiful cabled headband. But I did knit this beautiful cabled headband pretty shortly after doing that, and I was so proud of this at the time, and I'm still so proud of this one. Like, I enjoyed the process of this one because I felt like, I don't know, I had always just really like coveted cable knits, so I was very motivated to figure them out very early. And I was just so like impressed with myself for doing it, and just impressed with the process, right? Just this learning of like, oh my God, like all I do is shift these 3 stitches over here and then bring the back so it twisted. And like, that's what makes it look this way. Like, it blew my mind when I learned how to do cables. It just felt like so little effort to do something that looks so impressive. I do remember that this one was a bit tricky to knit in that this was before I understood like gauge and needle sizes and all these things. So I definitely was knitting this one very tight for the yarn and needle combination I was using. I was really having to kind of brute force my way through this one. So in retrospect, like, this headband should have come out bigger because I should have been knitting it on larger needles, and it would have been less of a battle. And also it would just wear a little bit better. So in terms of finished object enjoyment, I do wear this. I wore this like multiple times in the last few days, but it is a little bit more narrow than I would like for it to be. It does tend to kind of end up sitting with like part of my ear exposed kind of down here. I would love for it to be a little bit more beefy. I'm actually thinking about knitting another headband, but overall, I feel like I really enjoyed knitting this one. I enjoy making this one. I still love what it looks like. My only complaint is that sometimes it doesn't coordinate with the other things that I want to be wearing. This is again where I kind of want to do another one just to have like a more neutral option, but I feel like this one deserves to be like here maybe. Is that too high? Am I gonna like run out of room to put other projects? I feel like I need to reserve the right to move these things around later as I sort of start to understand things in the context of other things better. But for right now, I'm gonna put my Iverson way up there. Actually, before I commit to that, I should look at our cost per wear on that one. So this, I actually don't, again, have super accurate cost per wear because it is in my tracking app, but because it's like an outerwear accessory, I forget to track this all the time. When I'm logging my wears on things, I'm often doing it like the next day. It's just me thinking back to what I wore that day. So often little things like that get forgotten, especially when it's like, I wore it for like an hour on a dog walk, you know? So like, as far as outerwear accessories, like that definitely counts as a wear to me. Like, that's what they're for. I was never gonna wear it all day long, but it does mean it often doesn't make its way into the app. So according to the app, I've worn it 32 times. So I knit this was like the spring of 2022. So I've had this for over 3 years now, been multiple winters. 32 days is not a huge amount over that time period. However, again, I'm pretty sure I've worn it many more times than that. So we're just gonna have to go more off of gut instinct on this one than actual wear tracking. But yeah, I still feel like this deserves to be up there. Okay, so the next knit on the list, the next thing that I finished is the Quilted Sweater Coat by Alexander Tavold. Now, this is where, if you do have to be new here, I was a very adventurous beginner. I was not having anyone telling me that I shouldn't be knitting something until I learn more things. I have a goal and then I learn all the things I need to learn to do it. This is how it works. So this is another one where I finished it and I was like, oh my God, I made that. That's so cool. I had a vision, I made modifications, I learned how to do like little baby intarsia to do these pockets. Like, that's not in the pattern. I just decided I wanted to do that and figured out what I needed to figure out to do it. So there was a lot of satisfaction for me in this process. It was also obviously a challenging process because I was learning a lot of things as I went, but I did enjoy doing the bubble stitch. It felt like very satisfying results for something that wasn't actually complicated to do. This cardigan was a lot of seaming. I did not enjoy it. So what do I think about the process? Also, again, needing to remember to think about this through my lens now, would I enjoy making this now? I mean, I would not enjoy the seaming. I would enjoy that this was knit at, I think, an Aran weight or maybe even bulky. So would go fast now. I think back then, I think it took me about the amount of time it would take me to knit a sweater now at a finer gauge. So that would be satisfying. I think this was probably like a 7 on the enjoyment front. Oh, but again, the seaming. Is it a 7 even with the seaming? Maybe it's like a 6.5. And then finished object satisfaction. How do I feel about that? So again, at the time, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I envisioned. I'm so pleased with myself for figuring out how to do this, except for one thing, which is that, again, didn't totally understand gauge and ended up that my pieces were smaller than they were supposed to be according to the pattern schematic, according to the size that I picked. And you know when you know like just enough to be dangerous? So I knew enough that I knew that in blocking, you can sometimes fudge your numbers a little bit, right? You could get a little bit more length or width or whatever. I blocked too aggressively. So the back panel of this cardigan, the bubble knit is not so much a bubble. It's pretty flat, and it's funny because you can see like the structure of the bubble knit in that like you can see like the stitch that's like dipped down to create like what should be the bubble effect, but it's all just so stretched out that it doesn't actually bubble. Whereas like the sleeves do bubble, the fronts do bubble. So I was a little bit disappointed in the end result of this one just because of that, but in the context of everything else about it, I was still so jazzed about it. This is also one that currently I am not getting anywhere out of because I had an issue with the cuff. There was some, I don't even know exactly what happened, but somehow the cuff started coming undone. It needs a repair job. So it's been sitting untouched for a while. Again, I finished this in like mid 2022 and I've worn this 107 times. So that's quite a lot of times. Feel pretty good about that. But last worn 204 days ago because I think that's when I like developed this cuff issue. So I need to fix that, but I really should do that also because it's an opportunity for me to fix one thing that I did not love about it, which is that the sleeves ended up being wider than I expected them to be, and my cuffs did not cinch it in as much as they needed to relative to the size of the sleeve. So I really need to knit these again so that my cuffs can be smaller and the sleeves aren't like falling over my hands so much. So I actually have control over how far down they go. Will also mean my cuffs will finally be even because when I made them, again, I was very new. I had a very hard time like counting rows, you know, just to like be looking at a finished cuff versus one on your needles and understand, do they have the same number of rows or are they off by one? So it turned out that they were off by one, and by the time they were bound off, that was much more visible than it had seemed when it was on the needle. So that's just like a little silly thing that's always bugged me. And like one row doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're knitting at this bulky weight, it actually is kind of noticeable. Like one of the cuffs just does feel visually too short to me. So again, need to fix that. But for now, like I have gotten a lot of wear out of that. Very good like teaching process for me. I'm gonna say maybe it goes like around here. Is that too generous for my finished object satisfaction? Now, maybe we'll go with that for now. We'll move it if we need to. Okay, the next one was a real if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of project. I was like, hey, that Iverson was so great. Let's give another one that we can gift away to Grams as a thank you for teaching us how to knit. So for this one, I again enjoyed the process. I do think this one I remember was tricky to get started on the gauge front because again, I was still very much figuring out gauge. Definitely started it on needles that were too small, and it actually got to the point where it was like impossible to keep knitting on. Like it was just so tight that I could not move it. So I had to upsize my needles. I think I maybe had to upsize them like a couple times. Like I restarted this one a couple times to find needles that it worked on. The end result is that it came out much larger than my original Iverson and still very much wearable, but much more of a sort of statement piece, if you will, than mine was. Process enjoyment wise, I would say maybe a little bit lower than the first one, just because also it wasn't like so novel anymore to be like, wow, look at this thing I'm knitting. Like who knew I could make that? Isn't that cool? And that I had to restart it a couple times. I don't have wear stats on the finished object because again, this one was gifted away, but I do think it turned out really nicely. I marled together 2 similar color yarns that I had just been given in like a de-stash from my friend Amy, and I feel like it came out really nicely. One other thing actually about both of the Iversons that bugs me a little, but that I didn't realize when I knit mine, is that there's a part of the top of the headband where like it looks like a cable twist should have happened. And I think there's a part of the pattern where like looking back, like, oh, I think it was telling me to do one there, but in a way that was sort of unclear to me as I was working through it. And I think that without having a lot of experience with cables to sort of anticipate this situation of how like the cable cross would like interact with the larger twist that's happening in the middle of the headband, I didn't have the knowledge to be really like on guard about this. And so a very sort of subtle instruction, I think, went over my head. Knowing that now, that makes me a little bit less satisfied with it because I feel like I see that missing cable twist. So I'm gonna put this one a little bit lower for that reason. But I just enjoyed working on these in that they came together really quickly, right? Knitting at a pretty large gauge, a small object. There was no fiddly like heel shaping like you'd have on a sock. There was no small circumference because you were just knitting this flat until it became long enough to go around your head and then you'd seam it together. I enjoyed this one. Okay, the next thing that I knit was this headband for my mom, which there is no pattern for. I just was like, I've knit some headbands now, I can figure it out. And so this one didn't have any cable twists or anything. She specifically wanted it to fit under her bike helmet, so it needed to be flat. But I thought, well, maybe I'll do some little like decreases and increases in the center to give us kind of like a faux twist effect, do this little like bow tie shape in the middle. And I used this boucle yarn that I'd again gotten from my friend Amy. This was before I got into the realm of buying expensive yarn. So this one was a little bit weird to work on with the boucle. I think that especially at this point in my experience level, boucle was rough. It's hard to read your knitting. It's hard to see what you're doing. So process enjoyment on this one, not great, but also at least it did not take very long at all. So I finished this in June of 2022. I got no wear stats because it's not mine, it's out of my possession. But so process enjoyment, I would say this one was maybe like a 5, and finished object, I don't know. I definitely was like constrained by the use case of needing to fit under a bike helmet. I don't know, the color of the boucle is just not my favorite. It's just kind of underwhelming to me. So I feel like I'm gonna put this one maybe like here. I don't know, is that bad? We'll see how I feel after some other things have been added. Okay, next on our list is my Laura Dalgaard and Thuja sweater, which this one, warning, is not a size inclusive pattern at all. So don't get attached if that's gonna be an issue for you. But I do love this sweater. This one was really fun to me. So this was my first like intentional learning of Thuja. I didn't realize until later that it was actually the same technique I'd been using for the pockets on my quilted sweater jacket. I had just in that case been Googling like how to change yarn color mid-row. I hadn't encountered the term Thuja, and I was working on a much smaller scale and it was much more makeshift. So this is my first time properly, knowingly, entirely doing Thuja, and I felt like a wizard. I was just like, this is so cool. How am I doing this? It's amazing. I really loved the design of this sweater, just the like squiggly. It felt like it very much fit into this kind of thing that got me knitting in the first place, which was this idea of like, oh my God, I can knit things that are not what I picture when I picture knitting. You know, like it's not like a dated 80s sweater. That's not something I would ever want to wear. It's something that I actually think is like cool and interesting and modern and can feel like it's mine and part of my style. So this one felt like sort of a revelation in that domain. It was also knit at a super bulky weight, so it came together so fast. I did have to seam it again because of Thuja, but again because bulky weight, not a lot of stitches. This was probably one of my easier seaming experiences. And in terms of finished object, like again, at the time I was thrilled. Now I would say it ranks a little bit lower because again, with experience, I have learned that super bulky knits are hard to wear a little bit, both on the temperature front and just that they can feel kind of stiff. So like not really, but just in comparison to lighter weight knits, it just feels like more of an ordeal to be wearing this. It's much easier to overheat wearing this. So this is a tough one to rank because I feel like at the time, it's like, is it how much I enjoy wearing it now? Is it what it represented to me at the time? This is where I need 17 different axes. Okay, I think for process enjoyment, this is probably like an 8. This is one also that I did go back and make an alteration on. I ended up redoing the neckline in another color because I was feeling like that salmony pink was just like looking weird and kind of dead on me. So I improved my perception of the finished object. Do I like this more or less than my Iverson? Because it's also at an 8 on process enjoyment. So where does it rank on finished object satisfaction? Is it a 7? Like, okay, wait, let's look at how much I actually wear this thing. Since June 2022, I've worn it 38 days, which doesn't feel like a lot in 3. I mean, that is more than 10 days a year. Given that you really have to wear it on like quite a cold day, maybe that's not bad. Put this as 7 for now on my finished object satisfaction. All right, so next up we have the Monday Sunday Socks by Sari Nordland. These I knit in the summer of 2022. I very specifically remember working on these like around the bonfire at the cottage. Was this my first time knitting socks? Is that true? Did these overlap? Because my next project is also socks, so I need to compare start dates here. Okay, so they sort of overlap a little because the other socks that I started, I ended up needing more yarn to finish them. So I think while I was waiting for that, I think is when I started the Monday Sunday Socks. So let's skip ahead and look at the other socks first. Grizzly Socks by Anna Radchenko. So I made these for my dad. This was my first foray into sock knitting. So it was my first time dealing with small circumference outside of doing like sleeves on something, which even had I done sleeves in the round? Quilted sweater coat, no, that was seamed. Intarsia sweater, no, that was seamed. So this was actually my first experience with knitting small circumference in the round. That would mean that this is when I had to learn magic loop. I'm sure that was really fun. I think that this is also when I had to learn like a tubular cast on or something. I recall kind of having like a meltdown trying to figure out how to get this started. These were also, I think, done in a twisted rib. File under things that like, it's probably for the best that I wasn't watching knitting YouTube or like knew that twisted rib was a thing that I might like in theory dread, because I think a lot of people speak very poorly on twisted rib. Didn't phase me because I don't know any different. So what do I think about these? Process enjoyment. It was novel to make a sock because we've talked about this many times. My spatial reasoning, garbage. So the idea that I was just following these linear written instructions and producing a 3D object was very novel to me, right? The sock felt very different than like the seamed sweaters and other things that still fundamentally like could be like paper doll clothes, you know, like very flat and two-dimensional. And so the idea of this like heel turn was just absolutely mind-blowing. So it was cool that way, but there was a lot of stuff that I was figuring out, a lot of stuff I was learning as I went, and I don't love knitting socks. I have knit quite a few of them, but they're just, as much as I would love a drawer full of hand knit socks for myself, I just don't want to make them that much. So I've made, we'll get to them later, several for my dad at this point because he loves them. They're a great thing for me to do for him as a gift, but like just not my favorite thing. So I'm gonna say process enjoyment was probably like a 5, like brought up from potentially being lower based on just like the mind-blowingness of the 3D of it all. So we'll say 5. And then finished object satisfaction. This was pretty good, except that, again, understanding gauge, understanding stretch, all of these things that I had to learn in the process of knitting. I kept trying this on my foot, and like I knew that my dad's foot was longer than mine, so I was knitting the foot of the sock to be longer than I would need it to be. I didn't understand though how much his foot being wider than mine would mean that the sock actually ended up being shorter because of the way that when you stretch things this way, they get smaller this way. I hadn't really learned that. I hadn't computed that yet. And so when I gave them to him and they were suddenly like ankle socks, I was like, what? These are supposed to go halfway up your calf. I don't understand what's going on right now. So those I ended up actually, like, I think 2 years later, going back and adding like several more inches at the cuff for dad just so that he would have a more substantial sock, because he also, you know, didn't ideally want ankle socks. So those have improved a little bit since then, but also in kind of a makeshift way. I'm gonna say these are like a 5 and 5. Right smack in the middle of the graph are dad's Grizzlies. So now let's circle back to the Monday Sunday socks. So having now had a pair of socks under my belt, clearly I didn't mind knitting it that much because I wanted to do it again. I wanted to make myself a pair. And I was like, let's merge that with my cable skill set. We knit a sock, that was fine. Let's knit a hard sock. So these I did enjoy. Also, they came together pretty quickly because I was knitting these at a significantly larger gauge than the pattern is written for, because I was using leftover yarn from my quilted sweater jacket. This also meant I had some trial and error at the start to figure out how many repeats of the cable to do all the way around to get it to be the right cuff size, and then also figuring out how to modify the gusset of the sock with my different stitch count. In retrospect, very impressed with myself for figuring all of this out and like being willing to mess with those calculations so early on. This is what, the 7th, 8th thing that I knit, and I was mucking with gussets. I don't even understand gussets. So I'm gonna say process enjoyment, probably similar, probably like a 5, though I don't feel like I didn't have enough context to know how sick I would be later of a small circumference. So I think I maybe enjoyed this one a little bit more, maybe like a 6, more than I would enjoy knitting it now. I don't super want to go knit this now. Okay, I think maybe it's a 6 on enjoyment. Finished object satisfaction, I was very satisfied with these. I wore these all the time. Actually, this is one where I can give us stats on these. So is this the real stat, or is this another thing that I just don't track well because it's socks? Because so this is telling me I've worn it 12 days. Very bad, if true, because I've not worn these in 633 days. And that reason is because they got holes in the bottom. This wore through very quickly because, I mean, not only was I not using sock yarn, I was not even using spun yarn. Again, this was the like unspun yarn that I was using in my quilted sweater jacket cuffs that also came apart. So not good for heavy wear, not good for walking on all the time. I have been meaning to darn these for almost 2 years now. Should probably get around to doing that though, because I did really enjoy wearing them. I really love the like Mary-Kate and Ashley matching of them. It was just the perfect way to use up extra yarn from that project, right? Because I didn't have enough to do both, like mostly yellow with a bit of pink or vice versa. It was a perfect way to use up even amounts of leftovers in 2 different colors. They were cozy. My feet are just so prone to being cold. Like I've not convinced myself to knit myself a drawer full of hand knit socks, but in lieu of that, I do have an entirely purchased merino wool sock drawer. Like I no longer mess around with other kinds of socks. I'm just a cold-footed person. I have the worst circulation you've ever seen. I'm cold-blooded. So these socks were great. They were so warm. They were so cozy. I loved them so much. I need to fix them. So on our graph, I think that puts us, do they get docked because they got worn out? Here's the thing, I think I'm kind of afraid to darn them because I'm like, well, how long are they gonna last before it happens again? I do not have sock stop from when I did my reading socks that we'll get to later that I will add to the bottom of these when I at some point darn them, but I'm a little bit concerned about their hardiness regardless. So I think I'm gonna put this tentatively like here. Is that too high? Do I like them more than my quilted sweater jacket? Is that true? This is really hard. Okay, we're gonna go with that. Okay, next up, you know, I keep saying that I don't like knitting socks, but I did knit 3 socks in a row here. So maybe I do like knitting socks. Right? I think I did like knitting socks is more the thing. I think that at that point in my knitting process, it was really satisfying to have things that came together quickly. I was more interested in smaller projects, whereas now I'm more like, I don't want to knit some tiny little thing. I want a sweater, you know? So this was, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I wanted to knit someone a pair of socks as a gift. So I used the pattern that I used for Dad's socks. I finished these in August of 2022. And I feel like, you know, some of the novelty had worn off. Like I'd knit this pattern before. So I feel like my enjoyment was down a little, which also happened with the Iverson. I don't really repeat patterns now, and I think this is kind of why it just kind of gets boring to me. So enjoyed it a little bit less. I also didn't love the finished object as much. This isn't actually a picture of mine. I somehow took no picture of them finished, but mine were, I think, a marl of like a black and a gray yarn that in my head were going to be closer together in shade than they actually were, so it would look more of like a normal heathering, but it was more dramatic than I expected it to be. Anyway, so I think that these are probably somewhere around like here. And again, because these are gifted, I don't have any wear stats or anything like that, so moving right along. Okay, now I feel like with this next one, we're really entering the next era of my knitting. I feel like this is really where things start to take a turn in terms of ambition level and also in terms of things that like I am still so proud of, and where even now, years of experience later, it's not like, oh, what a nice beginner project. It's like, no, yeah, you made that and it's nice and it still holds up. I don't have complaints or critiques about this. I wouldn't do this any better now, except maybe in certain, we'll get to it. But first up in this category, the one that's making me say this is the Magnolia Bloom by Camilla Vad. Again, this is one not size inclusive. Don't get attached. But I love this sweater. It's the most luxurious thing that I've ever made, both in terms of how it feels and also what it cost, because this is the one thing that I would do differently now, knowing what I know. Because again, at this time, she still didn't understand gauge. And when I sort of did. Again, the worst part of the Dunning-Kruger curve, where you know like just enough to like create problems. Like you know enough that you actually know less than you did before. So I knew that my gauge was coming up small. And I was like, okay, I need to fix that. I need to match the gauge. I need to get my gauge swatch to be the right size, right? I knew that. Did not know that you can upsize your needle size and that sometimes that will get you to the correct gauge. Instead, I was like, oh, well, I guess I just have to, instead of holding 2 strands of Sunday with 1 strand of mohair, I guess I just need to hold 4 strands of Sunday and 2 strands of mohair. And now I need gauge. So again, end result, the most luxurious thing I've ever made, hands down. It has to be cold, but when it's cold, there's nothing in the world that feels better than this sweater. It costs so much money. Like, let me find this one. The sweater cost me $400. Ouch. So, and then the other ouch is that it cost me $400 and I've worn it 18 times since finishing it in the fall of 2022, which is not a lot of times. And again, it has a couple things working against it in this regard. So much like my Laura Dalgaard sweater, it's so hot. Right? Like it is so warm. It's so thick with merino, but also has 2 strands of this mohair, which is the softest, the Issayer soft silk mohair, the softest mohair I've ever felt. It's wonderful. It's so hot. And then unlike my Laura Dalgaard sweater, that one just feels more sort of rough and tumble than this one does, because this one's white and it also just, the motif, it feels very wintry, so it just doesn't feel as flexible as say like a traveling layering piece. So again, like that's where the Laura Dalgaard sweater really earns its place. This one is not as well suited to that. It feels very wintry for me. Like even if there were a day in October that were really chilly and where this would feel appropriate temperature wise, it doesn't feel appropriate to me vibe wise. So this is one that usually stays packed away out of my closet until like November, when I bring out the real like deep winter stuff. So this one's tough because again, this is where we need like 17D graphing, because I love this. Like in terms of finished object, in terms of feelings, love, like top of the charts. In terms of actual wear value, it doesn't fare as well. I do love it as a Christmas sweater anytime around the holidays. I'm so happy to be wearing this, and it feels kind of fancy. Not like fancy, like it's like an oversized sweater, but just the material has kind of like a sheen to it, and the mohair makes it feel sort of elevated. And so it does, you know, if I like put on some lipstick, do my hair nice, like I can feel dressed up in it. This is going to be one that's going to rank high regardless of actual practicality. So I'm going to say finished object satisfaction, particularly considering like where I was in my knitting career when I made this. This was my first foray into lace work. I had to learn how to do baubles. This is actually what made me get into knitting YouTube. I'm remembering now, because I was having a bit of a hard time figuring out how to get the baubles to pop really nicely. And I had seen some other people on Ravelry saying they were also having a hard time getting their baubles to really pop from the surface, and that, oh, this video from Taylor Earl, where she's working on her Magnolia Bloom, is the method that they're following, because she was making this little tweak to make the baubles pop more. So that's how I was introduced to Taylor Earl, and then as a result, broader knitting YouTube. I had no idea that whole world existed. So I also feel like I don't know, on that front, that also feels, this is a real seismic shift in the world of my knitting. I also really enjoyed, I'm remembering now, I cried at one point working on this project. Oh no, oh, it's all coming back to me now. Yeah. So I almost restarted this sweater entirely after having done like most of it. But this is tough because also like that was just me making mistakes. Like it was nothing about the structure of it. Like none of the things that made it unfun at certain moments were things that would make me not want to knit it again now where I was in my skill set at the time. This is the cost of being an ambitious beginner, right? Is like sometimes it's gonna be frustrating. Like as an adventurous beginner, you are sort of by definition learning through trial and error, which sometimes means error. So parts of it were not super fun. You know, I remember kind of having a meltdown, regrouping, starting again a few hours later. So how do I rate the enjoyment of this one? I enjoyed working with the yarn. It felt luxurious to work with, except that I was working with 6 strands because apparently I wanted to spend as much money on this as possible. I'm really torn about how to rank this one for process. Because in spite of it all, I feel very fondly. And I don't look back negatively on the process of knitting it, but maybe I'm just skewing that because I like the object so much. Okay, so maybe process is like a 6. Finished object, that's like a 9. I don't care that I almost never wear it. It's perfect, it's beautiful, it's a 9, fight me. Okay, next up is the Helm Sweater by Amy Herzog. This is one where I actually don't have a finished object photo. This was gifted away and I somehow like did not take a photo when it was done. This one I can tell you the process was not good. This was my first time knitting with superwash. I did not know how much superwash can grow, and this time it grew so much, and I had not, this is why I have trust issues with blocking and why I do mid-project blocks so often now, because let me tell you, knitting this whole sweater and then getting to the end and blocking it and it's suddenly becoming 50% larger and looking absurd was not a fun feeling for me to restart that entire process. Other than that, didn't really have qualms with the process, and it knit back up quickly after restarting. But again, like that's something wrong with the pattern. That was just like a weird thing that happened to me, and just learning again, adventurous beginner. We learn things, we make mistakes, superwash grows. I'm gonna say this one was like a 5 on process enjoyment. Finished object satisfaction, this one falls into the same boat as the second pair of Grizzly Socks, where the yarn color did not marl the way that I wanted it to. It was much higher contrast than I expected it to be, and it also, I didn't feel like it dispersed itself as well as I expected it to when it was just sort of allowed to randomly do what it was gonna do. It didn't feel random, it felt like there were weird pooling things happening. I think that now I would probably be better equipped to like intervene to disperse it a bit better, but this one just did not really achieve all my hopes and dreams for it. So I'm gonna say this one is probably like down here. Interesting, I really kind of expected that I would be having more of an issue with like things overlapping on the grid. So far, no 2 things have been landing in exactly the same place. I figured things would, and then I would have to decide, okay, which one between these 2 do I feel better or worse about? But so far, everything is its own little unique thing. All right, next up, we have the Khione Infinity Scarf by Louise Bolanos, which I finished in April of 2023. And what do I think about this one? I really wanted a scarf that was more neutral, because at that point my scarf collection was entirely plaid, which I love a plaid scarf. This really made sense to me as like a neutral in my wardrobe. It was very much like a utilitarian kind of knit that I had in mind, and I enjoyed knitting it. I mean, it was super bulky weight, so it knit up super quickly. That was fun, especially at that point I had been knitting for over a year now, and so I was kind of starting to work more quickly, and it was just sort of like, whoa, look how quickly I can get small projects done now. I was gonna say how this actually fared in our stats, but again, because this is outerwear, I do not track these as diligently. So I have tracked 14 wears on it. I do know that it is actually more than that. However, it's not quite as utilitarian as I imagined that it would be. I thought that the super bulky weight would be great because I was kind of modeling it after a scarf that I had years and years and years ago that I got from Anthropologie. That was like a mustard yellow scarf at a bulky weight. It was also an infinity scarf. I thought this would just be exactly like that. I will love it just as much, but I think that Some detail of the exact length of it must be different between the two, because I found that one much easier to put on and have it be like the right closeness to my neck without being too close and also without being too open, too droopy. Whereas my Khione, which I think was entirely my own doing, like I think I determined the length of it that I wanted. I don't think I took it directly from the pattern. It's a little too big when I just wrap it around twice. And when I wrap it around 3 times, it's a little like, especially because it's bulky, it doesn't have a lot of like give. So it's useful when I need a neutral scarf. It's just not as effortless a scarf as some of my other ones that I have that I did not knit. So where does this one rank? I would say I enjoyed this, I think like a 7. Like it wasn't super interesting, but it also wasn't difficult, and it had kind of enough to keep me interested because of the sort of wide ribbing that it's created with. So I'll say that's a 7. Finished object satisfaction, I would say, see now I'm finding myself doing more sort of relative comparison, because I'm like, okay, if it's a 7 on process enjoyment, if it's around a 6 or a 7 on finished object, that puts it somewhere around my quilted sweater jacket and my Lord Dalgaard sweater. How do I feel about it relative to the, it's getting mucky now. Do I enjoy it more than my quilted sweater coat? Is that true? I mean, I am wearing it more now than that, but that's out of commission because of the cuff issue. No, I feel like it goes over here in line with the quilted sweater coat. Okay, next up is my Sunny Top by Trust the Mojo. This is another one that is not great on the size inclusivity front. So I finished this one in May of 2023. This was my second, I guess, foray into lace knitting. This is the kind of project that made me really want to do this 2-axis graph, because I really enjoyed knitting this. I really enjoyed the lace work. I don't wear this. Like, how often have I worn this? I've worn this 12 times in like 2.5 years. So part of it's also probably that it's like a worsted weight wool. So this was one that I was creating out of leftovers from a project that we will actually get to soon. So it was more like materials forward, not super practical. Honestly though, the issue, I think I would wear it more if the fit was different. This is part of what gave me trust issues with the bottom up, because in this pattern, it's like, if you want a full length top, do this many repeats. If you want a cropped length, do this many repeats. I did the number of repeats for the full length, but I got somewhere really awkwardly in between, closer to a cropped length, but also the size that I was knitting. And again, I must have been off gauge because of this length issue and the fact that it fits a little closer than I think that it's supposed to. And so it just does this weird thing where it like kind of traces, like it comes in at the waist and like just starts to flare out at the hip, and then it cuts off. Like it's just a weird fit. So it's one that like I feel like I can only wear it with high-waisted pants where it's tucked in. And I think I've just learned that lace work is this awkward thing where I do really enjoy knitting it, but it's just not my style. So I'm not often like motivated to put together the right outfit that works with the cut and the fit of this. This is one that's gonna rank high on my process enjoyment and low on finished object. Like it's gonna kind of be in a weird no man's land, I think, on its own here, because I want to put this at like an 8 on enjoyment, and I'm gonna put it at like a 4 on finished object satisfaction. This one is down here by itself. I had a great time knitting you, Sunny Top, but I'm sorry, you're not it in my wardrobe. All right, next up is my Squiggle Sweater. This is what that Sunny Top yarn was left over from. This was a weird process. This is where I was trying to duplicate a sweater from And Other Stories that I was obsessed with. I like learned to knit in the time that I had been hunting for this sweater. So I used as my basis for this the basic pullover set-in construction by Amy Herzog. Process enjoyment. I put off starting this project for quite a while. I had all of the materials and I had the idea, and then I sat on it. I had to like build a chart because this pattern, it's a written pattern. There's not supposed to be any sort of color work in it, so there's no chart. So I had to like read through the pattern and like create a chart. So this was very involved. And then also it is in Tarja, so that was something that I was having to manage the bobbins while I was working on it, and then seam it at the end. This took me like all day to seam. I had to redo so many things. I still am not happy with how one of the shoulders looks. There's kind of like a part that is not as like smooth at the shoulder as I would like it to be, but I was like, I've done this like 4 times now. it's gonna be what's gonna be. So this one took years off my life. However, when I was just knitting the panels, I did enjoy the intarsia. In most places, it wasn't a horrible number of bobbins in use at a time. Watching it come together with all the little blobby shapes was fun. I'm gonna say this process, was it a 6? Am I just nothing is ranking really low on the process enjoyment? Does that part of the graph like not even exist? Am I being too generous? Are there things that are going to rank lower we just haven't gotten there yet? No, I really did enjoy watching the intarsia of this come together. So I think this is going to be a 6 on process. This finished object, this is another one where I'm a little bit torn because there's one very specific problem with it, which I should actually try to see if I can do anything about, but I'm scared. So my one issue with this, the neck is tight. It's a folded down neck picked up with a neck like afterward and knit down. So it's not like you do the neck, you tack it down and then you keep knitting, which would make it almost impossible to fix. It was like the last thing done, but I looked at it to try to find where it ends, to like unpick that end, try to unravel where it's like bound down onto itself. But there's so many ends in that area because of like the shoulders and everything that I'm a little bit afraid of starting to pick at ends and picking the wrong ends. I feel like I need to figure this out because I think I would wear this sweater so much more if I didn't feel like it was like low-key like not that it's choking me, but it's just, it sits like here, like at this part of my neck that I hate anything touching there. Like I feel like I could be strangled at any moment. I see it in my closet. I'm like, why don't I wear that more often? Like, I love that sweater. And then I wore it a few weeks ago, specifically, like I wanted to wear it to Woolstock when I went. And that day when I had it on, I was like, oh yeah, this is why. This is why I don't just throw it on when I need a sweater, because I feel it. I'm aware of it the whole time I'm wearing it. But it looks so good. This is why I wanted so badly to replicate that sweater. Like, I love how that sweater looks. I love how this sweater, duplicating it, looks. But that neck just kills me. So I need to figure out how to fix that. Like, I want to put it at an 8 because I love how it looks, but I feel like realistically it's more of a 7. And if I can get myself to fix it, then it gets promoted, because I truly think that if I could redo it and could get it to be loose enough to not feel that at all, I think I would wear this so much more often. Do I bump it up more just because I love how it looks? Because I mean, the Magnolia Bloom did get kind of a generous placement in that way, but I think there's a bit of a difference here in that the Magnolia Bloom, while I don't wear it a lot, it's more just because there's not the occasion for it a lot. It's not something wrong with it. Like, yes, it's a very warm sweater, but it's the perfect sweater for a very cold day. Whereas the Squiggle Sweater, it's never the perfect sweater because it's choking me. I think it's gonna sit there. So actually, let's check our stats to be sure. So I finished this in June of 2023. Since then, I've worn it 49 times. I mean, that's not a bad number. It's been just over 2 years. So I've worn it basically every other week since that. That feels not true. So I think I probably wore this more in the like 6 months to a year after I first knit it. I don't feel like I wear it as frequently now, again, because of the, right? Like when I finish knits, it's very novel to me. It's very exciting. I tend to wear that knit a lot. I think that was even more true when I was earlier in my knitting. I had fewer hand knits to cycle between, and because I liked that I knit them, I wore things that I knit a lot. There were fewer of them, they got more wear. This is one that really needs a neckline rescue. If I can, I'm really scared of like destroying the sweater, of doing what I did with the Magnolia Bloom, where I tried to fix one small thing and ended up having to basically restart. I'm really afraid of doing that. I do obviously have a much more developed skill set now than I did at the time. I'm just a little scared. We'll see if I'm brave enough. Okay, the next one is my Poppy Tank, which is another sort of semi-makeshift. So there like used to be a pattern on Ravelry that used this chart. I think it got taken down for like copyright reasons. I happened to take a screenshot of like the photo from the pattern, really loved it, made a chart based off of it once that pattern had been pulled from Ravelry, and made this tank top. So this one was very, again, lots of trial and error. How do I do straps? And I remember trying several different kinds of straps. I still ended up at not very practical ones. I had tested double knit straps and concluded that they were too thick, so I ended up doing these ones with a bit of ribbing along the edges instead, but it's still not enough ribbing. They still curl. You still have to pin it all the way down every time you wash it for it to not curl. In retrospect, should have just done the double knit or maybe even an I-cord, though I did like the look of the chunkier straps. Anyway, this turned out to be one where I had such a vision and I was so obsessed with the idea and I needed to make it, even though it was a nightmare of intarsia bobbins. There were like 5,000 of them. And in the end, I never wore it. I mean, I wore it a few times. So I finished this in August of 2023. I wore it the following year to go to Knit City, Toronto. Again, it's a fun like statement piece. So for like an event, it was really fun to wear. I found it hard to want to wear the rest of the time. It just felt kind of high maintenance, you know, it required kind of like a stick-on bra situation. The straps are kind of fiddly, and more than anything, I just found it a little bit hard to fit into my personal style. Like I just found that I had to counterbalance it so aggressively with more sort of masculine elements for it to not feel too frilly on me. So it was just a bit of a struggle, and it turned out that my friend Jan, who has a much more like girly frilly style than I do, she was obsessed with it and she was like hounding me to make her one. And so one day I was just like, you know what? Here you go. I feel like this will live a better life with you. And I think that was the right call. So this was one where process enjoyment. This one was a beast. Again, a million intarsia bobbins, so much trial and error, but finished object satisfaction. Yeah, this one is so hard to rank because like the process was a disaster. But I was so motivated by what I wanted it to look like, and it does look exactly like what I wanted it to look like. It just isn't like the easiest thing to wear. And so I'm like, how? And like to the degree that I gave it away, which that's the only thing I've ever knit with the intention for it to be for myself that I ended up gifting because I don't wear it. But I love knowing that it's like out there and that Jan has it, and every time Jan shows me how she's styled it, it's so fun for me. And so it's like I love it like a piece of artwork and not like a piece of clothing, if that makes sense. I really like the color palette. That's very satisfying to me. So how low do we go on process enjoyment? Because those bobbins were terrible. It was the most chaotic intarsia I've ever done by far, but it was so cool to see it come together, and I feel like it turned out really well. And yeah, I feel like the process was a nightmare, but it was also very satisfying. So I feel like it's still a 5 for me on process. And finished object satisfaction, again, is tough. I love it for Jan. So, okay, if I think of it through the lens of if this had been for Jan the whole time, how would I feel about it? And I think I would feel really good about it. I think it would it be an 8? No, it can't be an 8. The straps are a real issue. The straps dock it at least 1, possibly 2, because they're terrible to deal with. Okay, I think maybe it goes here, just below the Monday Sunday socks, above Dad's Grizzly Socks. Okay, that feels reasonable. All right, next up that I finished in September of 2023 is my Barnsley Sweater by Cheryl Mokhtari. This is another one that is not size inclusive, but oh man, I love this sweater. Like, I already know that this one is going to rank high in my finished object satisfaction because this is one that I wear frequently and in quite different situations. Like, I find that the waffle knit and the mohair make it feel kind of like elevated and interesting. So if I kind of do myself up in other ways, I can again feel like I'm like dressed for something nice. But at the same time, waffle knit is just so cozy. It's just like innately comforting to me. So this is one that I wear around the house when it's cold out. It's also one that makes it into a suitcase a lot of the time when I'm packing to go somewhere because it's a great warm layering piece. It's a little bit of a step down from the Laura Dalgaard Squiggle Sweater. I tend to pack both of them. So this one, very useful. I think it's really cute. It's in a color that I tend to shy away from, but I was feeling really into it at that moment and wanted to try it and was pleasantly surprised by how much I actually like wearing it, because I tend to not like wearing pastel-y colors very much. Actually, let's look at our wear stats. So I have worn this one 50 times since finishing it 2 years ago. So 25 times a year, basically every other week. That feels pretty good. And I do feel like, unlike my Squiggle Sweater, I feel like that's actually consistent. Like, I think that I've continued to wear it quite a bit, so that tracks for me. So finished object, I feel like my only complaints about this one are that gauge wise it did come out a bit small, so it is a little tight in the sleeves, and I just expected it to have a bit more positive ease than it does generally, though I feel like actually the body turned out really well. Really just the sleeves I wish were a bit roomier, but this is a good sweater. So I think I need to put this at like a 9 on satisfaction. Process wise, this one just felt like it went on forever. The waffle knit was just kind of time consuming and tedious, and even when I thought I was done, like there was a point where I did the bottom ribbing, and it's a hefty ribbing. It's like 3 or 3.5 inches or something. And then I decided after blocking that it actually wasn't long enough, and so I had to like take that off and knit more body and then knit more ribbing. Like so I cast this on May 30th and finished it September 11th. And did I have any other projects going on? I don't think I was knitting anything else concurrent to that. So that took me June, July, August, and halfway through September. So this one dragged. I was definitely over it by the time it was done. Though I had enjoyed it initially. This was my first raglan construction, I think, so that was kind of fun and interesting and novel. It just got tedious at the end. So I think that's like a 6 on enjoyment. Is it a 7? No, I think it was, Okay, you know what? We're gonna do a half. We're gonna do 6.5, and we're gonna put that at a 9 for our satisfaction. Tied with the Magnolia Bloom on satisfaction, and enjoyed it a little bit more. So I didn't have to reknit most of it 3 times. Oh my god, can you believe we're not even in the era yet of like my channel? Like none of these are things that have ever been on the channel. We're getting there, we're almost there. So this next one I finished in November of 2023. This is my classic rib by Pernille Larsen. I have very mixed feelings about this one. In terms of the process, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought that I was going to. I was a little bit concerned about the 2x2 rib, so I was a little bit apprehensive about this one, but I was motivated by what I wanted it to look like. And so I was like, that's fine, I'll power through. And then I actually found it really kind of nice and meditative to work on. I think 1x1 rib is more tedious to me. 2x2 is like pretty fine. I quite like it. I did find this one just kind of tricky in terms of the finished object front, where I hadn't done all over ribbing before, and so I didn't really understand all the ways that that kind of makes it harder or just affects how you estimate finished fit when it's ribbing, because like it's gonna look really small and then it's gonna stretch when you put it on, but also when you block it, sometimes it really can like stay open and start to lose some of that elasticity depending on the fiber and exactly how it's blocked. In the end, I have a couple of qualms with this one. Yeah, I'm so torn about this one because this is one where I did a lot of calculating to do waist shaping on this one to add that in. I basically was just like, oh, look at how like the raglan shoulders are done with this beautiful, like perfect increasing situation happening here. I could use that same method where it's sort of branching from this one center line. I could use that exact approach to do decreases and then increases to fit my waist and my hips in this, and that would work really well in terms of this having the fitted look that I want it to, without it having to stretch too much at my hips or like be too loose at my waist. Was really pleased with myself for figuring out how to do that, was really proud of that end result. The blocking though did mean that it kind of landed slightly differently than I expected it to, so the whole thing is just a little bit looser than I thought it was going to be. It doesn't have the negative ease that I thought that it was going to. And that waist shaping just doesn't hit quite perfectly at the height that I thought that it was going to. So that was a bit disappointing, but I still really like how this turned out. Another thing that is not my favorite on this one, I have a lot of things on the list for this one, is the neck turned out shorter. Like the whole time I was working on it, it seemed a lot higher, but then the combination of, again, like as things stretch this way, they shrink this way, but also just once the sleeves were added, the way that that kind of pulled down the whole top of the sweater isn't something that I really knew to anticipate in that way or to that degree. So in retrospect, I would have made that neck longer, but because you start there wasn't a way to add it later without having like a visible kind of jog in the ribbing, because it would start going the other way. So there are things that would be different about this if I were to do it again, but I do really like this one. It feels like a very different contribution to my knit wardrobe. It has a very different look than like your standard pullover. It feels a little bit more dressy. It feels like something I can wear out in like, when I'm like trying to look nice. I don't know. The thing though is that I've only worn this 19 times, despite the fact that I finished it 2 years ago. So it's not getting the wear that I would love for it to, but part of that, one last complaint about this one, is that when I did the bind off on the sleeves, I just did a regular bind off because since it's 2x2 ribbing, I at that point, I think knew how to do a regular sewn bind off for like 1x1. And this pattern, I think, told you to rearrange the stitches to do like a 1x1 sewn bind off, but I was like, I don't like how that looks on a 2x2 rib, and it's a lot of work for something that I don't think looks better, so I'll just do a regular bind off. And in retrospect, it's too tight. And I think I actually tried maybe doing the stretchy bind off, but then that like let it flare, which was also bad. So I think it does really need a sewn bind off to give you the right tightness, looseness on that sleeve. I mean, now I know how to do a 2x2 sewn bind off, like a true one, like not rearranging stitches, but actually to have it keep looking 2x2. So in retrospect, that's what I would do. And this is one where, again, like my Squiggle Sweater, I've sort of been in the process of trying to convince myself to go back and do that. Again, a little bit scared to like try to find that end and unpick, but that will be one that's easier because it's just the end of a sleeve. There's not all the shoulder ends hanging around. That's one I would like to adjust at some point, because I think that that will genuinely affect the sort of ease of wear on this one, how effortless it feels to put on. So I did enjoy it, even if the math was a lot. I did enjoy working it up. It came together pretty quickly. I feel like this is like an 8 on enjoyment. Finished object satisfaction, somewhere between like a 6 and a 7 maybe. But I mean, if my Dalgaard is a 7, you know, this is our first one that's gonna fight for the same space. I'm gonna put that right with the Dalgaard. I think that's the right answer. Okay, I need to start moving more quickly because it's been 2 hours. Help me. Okay, next up, these are Dad's Thuja Socks by Bobby Ziegler. So I knit these when? I finished these in November of 2023. These were, I think, a Christmas present. And these, again, no wear stats because they were a gift, but I enjoyed working on these. I found these really kind of low effort, high reward in terms of the texture on them. Yeah, I think it's like a broken rib. It's a wide rib. I liked that. I think these are probably my favorite socks that I've worked on, both in terms of process and also enjoyment. They were pretty chill to work on. I really like the color that they're in. I mean, it's a sock, so it's never gonna be the highest on my enjoyment, but I would say these were probably like a 7. Finished object satisfaction. It's not like, wow, I love it. It doesn't make me like excited like some of these do. So it's the struggle between like the utilitarian, like, yeah, it fit the brief. It did exactly what I wanted it to do. I'm gonna put it at a solid like 7 and 7. Again, I seem to go through like seasons where suddenly I knit a lot of socks, because then I knit myself a pair of reading socks. This is what I call the like oversized, like slippery socks. This is one where I took a pattern. So this is a drops design pattern called 116-28 socks with cables. Great name. And they're supposed to be normal socks. I just knit it with a bigger yarn and bigger needles to make a bigger gauge to get the like slippery sock effect. And this is one where, much like my other socks, my Monday Sunday socks, I mean, they were great until they had a giant hole in them, but I lived in these. I wore these like every day for a long time. Let's see, how did this actually, I feel like I did track these more successfully. So according to this, I've worn them 58 times. So maybe more than that, but at least that many. But again, then they got worn out in the bottom because, again, I was using an unspun wool. I used Sock Stop on the bottom of these thinking that that would help extend their longevity, and maybe it did, but they still wore through. So this is a challenge. It's also like I am stubborn, and I wanted to make socks out of all wool and not incorporate nylon. Like, I understand why socks incorporate nylon for this reason. They were really cute. They were okay to make. There's a lot of cabling going on, and you're doing it quite frequently, so it was a lot of, it felt very like stop and start to work on. So these I was definitely more motivated by the end result. So I'm gonna say these, I think, on the process front were 6. Finished object, I loved them until they had a hole in them, and now it's been almost 2 years. Need to fix things. This is the theme of this episode. I'm gonna say they're also a 7. Things are really fighting for space now. But I think that these are a 7 because they got worn out so quickly. But if I fix these, get them back into rotation, they would deserve to be higher up on the list. And this is where we finally, it's a new era again. We are now in the YouTube era. This is the first project that featured as a whip on my channel. There's also another one that I was working on concurrently, but this is the first one that was finished. So these are the Snuggly Socks that I made for my dad. This was a real big sock season for him. He got socks for both Christmas and his birthday, which is not too long after. These are the Snuggly Socks by Isabel Gerzabek. This was, I mean, so I knit 3 socks in a row at this point. I think at this point was sort of like, I'm ready to be done with socks again for a while. And I don't think I've knit socks since. So enjoyment, I would say low. I like them fine. I prefer the motif of the Thuja socks. And I'd kind of learned by this point that I didn't want to just be reknitting the same pattern. Like that kind of felt dull to me. These were useful from a process perspective because I needed something. This is when I was on my trip to Italy in 2024. I needed something more portable than the next project we're going to touch on, my giant no frills cardigan. They served their purpose at the time, but would I be jumping to knit them again? No. So I'm going to say process enjoyment, be like a 4. Finished object satisfaction, maybe like a 7. I think at this point we were doing some troubleshooting on like fit and stuff for Dad's socks, and these did turn out better. I knit these like much larger than the other ones to account for the stretch from his foot that would make them seem smaller, and so I was satisfied with that, but again, that did make them take longer, and so I was just kind of over it. But so I'm going to put these Snuggly Socks right there. Now, actually, before we get to the no frills cardigan, because it was such a beast, something else got finished in the time that I was working on that as well. So this is my dog walking gloves that I used as my basis, the Bridge Arm Warmers by Kukiko Inoue. So these are a funny one because I had this concept in mind that I wanted sort of fingerless gloves, but that would have like a finger covering part that you could add, but that wasn't a flap, so it wouldn't get caught on your pockets, but that also would only cover some fingers, so I would still have dexterity when I was dog walking and wanting to like do some training and stuff with copper and being able to handle food. So these I do wear all the time. Again, I don't have great stats on this because it's just like a little outerwear accessory. I did wear these a ton during the cold weather last year. I've started wearing them again this year, but I don't tend to use those little finger add-ons that were kind of the whole concept of these. I found those to sort of be more fiddly than they're worth. I did use them on some especially cold days. We'll see this winter if they get more use, but really it's just been having fingerless gloves that's been useful to me, which was also surprising to me because I've always kind of thought they were kind of silly, but I've realized that for contexts where your hands can be mostly in your pockets, but just once in a while you need to use your hands, they actually do quite a good job, and they kind of help bridge, like if you have no gloves on and you put your hand in your pocket, like there's kind of a part of your wrist that needs to be bridged, and it is helpful to still have like the extra insulation on your hand. So they've been more useful, just the fingerless part, than I expected them to be. The process wasn't my favorite. At this point, I feel like I'd kind of arrived where I sit now, which is that accessories seem kind of like small and fiddly and unappealing to me, and just kind of like something standing in the way between like me and the next sweater I want to make. So process enjoyment, I would say, was maybe like a 5 or a 6. They did go quickly. There's like an attachment to them in that I picked up this yarn on my trip to Venice and a Venice yarn shop, so that's kind of a fun element that I like about the finished object part. Again, I like the fingerless part. I don't really use the finger add-on part all that much, but maybe I will this year. I deliberately knit the finger covering part longer than would normally be the case to get some extra coverage. I thought I would appreciate that, but sometimes I feel like it's kind of in the way and I end up folding it down, but at least it is long enough that it can be folded down. This one's very iffy. I'm gonna say this shares space with the Poppy a little above the middle here, because I do find them genuinely quite useful, and I do enjoy how neutral they are while still being kind of interesting with sort of like marled color to them. I do like them. All right, now we've finally gotten to my No Frills Cardigan by Petite Knit, which I started knitting at the beginning of 2024 and finished knitting June 25th. So this one took a long time because it's a beast, but it was so worth it. So despite the fact that it took forever, I enjoyed working on this. I love some mindless stockinette, even though it was knit flat, so I was purling half those rows. I don't know, it really didn't bug me. This was a rare case where I was working on multiple projects concurrently, which I don't tend to do, so I did need to break it up a little bit, but considering how monotonous I feared this was gonna be, I feel like it's like a 7 on process. I really did not mind. The hardest part was just trying to get it to the right length, so I did end up having to do some messy things at the end to like add length, remove length. There's a whole thing. But yeah, pretty solid process. And finished object, I love this thing. Despite the fact that it's determined to destroy itself, I have had so many near catastrophes in this cardigan, so many things that should have stained it forever that I've washed out of it. But it's a showstopper. Like, it's so much fun to style in a real outfit. It's also so great to just throw on around the house. Like, let's see how this fares in my wardrobe stats. I have worn this 62 days that I vlogged it here, but again, I know that there are more times, because that's how many times I was like, this is what I wore today. There were definitely other times where I threw it on when I just like got cold for an hour, you know, like a house coat. So this one, considering it's only been a bit over a year, I cannot complain about that. That's really great. I think it's gotten a little bit less sort of daily rotation. I'm just cold kind of wear now that my Lakes cardigan is complete, because this one is just a little bit less clunky, I guess, because it doesn't have so much length to be carrying around with me. But this no frills cardigan, I have no regrets about this. I'm obsessed with color of this. It's great. I think this is gonna go, again, high up here in the 9s with the Magnolia Bloom, with the Barnsley. This is a Hall of Famer. And next up, we're probably gonna turn a little in a slightly different direction. So this is my Tekla top by Milena Jahala. I picked this pattern after so much trying to figure out what to do with this yarn. I love variegated yarn in the skein. I find it very hard to actually use and things I will actually want to wear. Finally landed on this. Do I wear this? No. Let us look at our stats. They're not good. I have worn this 6 times since I finished it in July 2024. I figured, like, it's more of like a pajama, like loungy top, but I figured it would get good use in that category. But I don't know. I don't think I really fully thought through that, like, I don't really sleep in sleeveless things. Like, even when it's hot, any sort of like moving air makes me cold. So like in the summer, because there's air conditioning usually going, I still want sleeves when I want like a lightweight long sleeve is my ideal pajamas. So I am just not dressed like this most of the time in the summer inside. When I'm wearing a tank top in the summer, it's usually actually because I'm outside where there's no air conditioning. And this is just not the kind of top I can effortlessly wear outside. Like, I have to be taped into this in order for it to not be a walking wardrobe malfunction. So it's just not practical. So enjoyment wise, I mean, it came together quickly. It was pretty simple because it's mostly stockinette. The ruffle was fun. So I enjoyed working on it. I also had to learn how to do an I-cord. That was kind of interesting and satisfying. I was so happy to finally be using this yarn, and to see it work up into a fabric was really fun. So I think actually enjoyment wise, I think it was high. I think this one is like the sunny top. High enjoyment, finished object, not great. Am I more satisfied with the finished object than my sunny top? Sort of. No, I think that they're actually a dead tie. I think that they're the exact same. Fun to do, not useful to me. All right, next up from August of 2024 is my Cloudbow top by Reed Keys. What do I think about my Cloudbow? This is an interesting one because there's a lot of different things. So process enjoyment, it was weird to be knitting such fine yarn on such giant needles. It took some adjusting to, and it never fully stopped being weird. But it was fun how quickly it came together. It also has just kind of like an interesting construction that none of it's hard, none of it's confusing, none of it even like takes that much thought or effort. And it's just sort of novel, so I liked that. I did find it a little bit easy to make mistakes, like just accidentally getting your needle in the wrong part of a stitch because of the mismatch between the needle size and the yarn, which did produce, like, it's not as pristine a finished object as it could be, but I also find like the halo covers a lot, and it's a very high impact piece. Like, I do love to wear this one as like an outfit. Like, I don't put this on like just to lounge around the house, but I do like to style it. But again, there are like imperfections in it that I don't love. So it sort of has things pulling it in opposite directions on both axes. So like, what do I do with that? Okay, I feel like it's a solid 7 on enjoyment. 7 is just what everyone says when they don't know, right? Yeah, 7 enjoyment. Finished object, I'll put it like a 7.5. I hope that this is legible to me when I'm done. You'll be seeing a much nicer version. This is what it currently looks like on my screen. This is what I'm scribbling. So you're welcome for the nice version that I made for you. It was very obvious what labels went with what when I was drawing it. I'm literally probably gonna have to, I'm doing this in Procreate. Procreate has a feature where you can watch like a time-lapse video of you like creating your thing, and I literally might have to watch that to figure out what label goes with what dot later, but we're doing our best. Oh, I didn't tell you anything about my wear count. Does that affect our assessment? So I have worn this, what? This is how you know that sometimes your idea of how much you've worn things doesn't actually line up with the truth, because, so I finished this August 2024. It's been over a year. Shocked to learn I've only worn this 9 times. In my head, I've worn it more times than that. But then again, considering it's definitely like a statement piece, like, and it's like an outfit piece. It's not like an around the house piece. That's not bad. I have no regrets about that. I enjoy it enough the few times that I do apparently wear it that I feel good about where that landed on the grid. Okay, next up, finished also in August of 2024. I think these two maybe overlapped a little bit when I needed to like wait while this blocked or something. I don't know. Anyway, Fausta bralette by Low-Key Bold Knit that I actually made into a Fausta top. So this is one, it's almost there on size inclusivity, but not entirely. I think it goes up to a 56-inch bust if I'm remembering correctly, but I do give this one a little bit of extra credit or leniency because it does have so much bust customizability. It's not just like you pick one measurement for your bust and that informs everything. You're actually doing like cup shaping that's all very detailed and customized. So really do respect that about the pattern. This is one where, again, I put this one off for a long time after having the materials because I knew I needed to do so many calculations to figure out how to do exactly what I wanted to do with this, because instead of just the bralette it's written as, I wanted a whole top, I wanted waist shaping. We were reattempting what I was doing with my classic rib, but again, ribbing, all of our ribbing is just so hard to get to fit the way you want it to in my experience. It's just so hard to know what it's gonna do once it's blocked. How open is it gonna stay? What does that mean about the length of it? Did do mid-project blocks on this, but even just over time of wearing it, things have sort of stretched and shrunk and done different strange things. So the ultimate final fit of this is not perfect. It's not exactly what I envisioned, but I am still really impressed with what I managed to accomplish with it and how good the fit is. But it was kind of a monster to work on because I had to be so mindful of where I was relative to what measurements. I felt like I was trying it on constantly. I was measuring it constantly, but I do like a 2x2 rib. So I feel like this was like a 6 on process. Finished object, let's look at our wear stats. I feel a little bit iffy about this one. So this one has now had, I finished it kind of like at the end of that summer, right? So it didn't really get summer wear. It's now had a summer in 2025. So I've worn it 13 times, which like doesn't feel terrible, also doesn't feel great. I feel like I could have gotten more wear out of this as a layering piece than I did. There is an element to it where it just feels a little bit higher maintenance to wear. It kind of requires like either a sticky bra or just like kind of being more aware when you're wearing it, just like making sure that you're not bending or slouching in such a way that you're going to be flashing people. It requires a little more awareness and poise. I think this one is a 6 on process. Finished object, I do really love this. I'm obsessed with the color. When it is the right kind of day where I am up to wearing it, I do really love it. I'm gonna put it at an 8. I think it's an 8. I am really pleased with all the shaping that went into that and how well fitted it is. Even if it could be better, it's really good. Okay, next up is my Sailor Swift top by Veronica Lindberg. So I finished this in September of 2024. So it was kind of too late for it to have a summer season. How did it fare this year? I have worn this 13 times. So not far off from the Fausta, same thing. I think summer knits are a thing I'm still just kind of like learning how to integrate into my wardrobe. I think there's another just sort of practical issue where, because they're my knits, I want to store them folded so they don't get stretched out. but that means that they're not stored where most of my summer tops are. So if I'm just looking in my closet for a top to wear today, they're not in that spot. So I moved my Sailor Swift to be just hanging because I think that with its like silk fiber, I think it's quite fine. I am not worried about it stretching out. It doesn't have the same kind of stretch. But I am worried about my Fausta. I don't think I can hang it in the same way without that being an issue. So there's just sort of an object permanence issue where sometimes summer knits are kind of out of sight, out of mind. This one also has a bit of a practicality issue where my armhole seemed so fine the whole time. And then when I added the I-cord at the end, it seemed like it cinched them up so much. Like I probably did it too tight. I tried to do it loosely, but I'm a tight knitter. It's a tough ask. So this is when we're like, I do notice it where I'm wearing it. It's sort of the issue of my Squiggle Sweater where I feel it here, except this one, I feel it here. So it's not quite as effortlessly wearable as I would love for it to be. I enjoyed working on it. The striping went super quickly. It was very motivating. Didn't love the I-cord, but like that was fine as a finishing touch. It was fairly small. I think that I would say this was a 7 on enjoyment. So many 7s. And finished object, I'm gonna put it right at the 6 with the Khione Scarf. I think those are right about on par with each other in my wardrobe. It's funny looking at this, there's a real cluster. Okay, so the next thing that I finished, this was a project that came together super quickly in September of 2024. This is my mom's scarf. This is a scarf for my mom for Christmas that I knit for her out of this yarn that she picked out when we were in that yarn shop in Venice together. And this is a funny, I'm like, how do I rate this? So process enjoyment, you know what? It was high because this went so fast. I was knitting it on giant needles. I was just making it up as I went. And it was fascinating because this yarn, hands down by far, weirdest yarn I've ever worked with. It's just like a million different kinds of yarn tied together every so often. So it would change. And it was always like, what's coming next? It was like, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. Fascinating. So very much enjoyed the process. Oh my God, is this gonna be my highest rated process enjoyment? It just might be. I mean, it might be helped by the fact that I was knitting this when I was visiting with my 3 best friends who we all went to high school together and now live spread across the country. But so about like once a year we can get together usually. And so I was knitting this, visiting with them, and they were all, again, on the edge of their seats waiting to see what was going to come next out of this ball of yarn. They were just like, what is going on? So it was hilarious. It was a great time for all. I was done it by the time I was back home a few days later. I think this is a 9 on process. This is our first process 9. Hands down. Finished object satisfaction. I mean, it's tough because it's definitely not my personal style, but I think it also like fit the brief of exactly what mom wanted it to be. So I'm gonna put it high on process, a little bit lower on satisfaction, but like, yeah, it was fun to make. All right, and now this is when we circle back to my sort of foray back into socks halfway because I knit Christmas stockings last year. So these I finished in November 2024. These are the Christmas stockings by Claire Slade. Because this is home decor, I don't have wear stats for you, but I did use them for Christmas last year. They're gonna have a worse use stat this year because I was in fact away over Christmas, so these stockings were not involved. So they're 1 for 2 now, but that's not true because they also will have been on my wall until I leave for that trip, and I will have enjoyed them there. So they will still have been used, and these were exactly what I wanted them to be. I wanted nice, pretty stockings that could hang on my wall that I knit myself, and they totally did that job. I did not love knitting them. This is the most like all over the place cable pattern I've done, just in terms of like different cables going on in different rows and cabling at different points and trying to keep track. So these did take significantly longer than I expected them to. I thought they would be more like the rating socks I'd knit the year before. They took so much longer than that. And again, it's a sock. It's just not my favorite thing to knit. So I'm gonna say that was a 5 on process. But finished object, that's a 9. I like those stockings. They look very nice on my wall. They make me happy when I put up my Christmas decor. I was gonna say 10 out of 10, but no, I decided it's a 9 out of 10, but you know, close. All right, next is the Minou Cardigan by Louisa Reckhoff, which I finished on December 23rd of last year. Thank goodness, because it was my sister's Christmas present. So this one was, I thought that I gave myself plenty of time to work on this one by starting it at the end of October. I was like, end of October to end of December, 2 months. Great, perfect. That's how long sweaters take me. It'll be so fine. the cabling on this one combined with the brioche, it was a beast. I was so down to the wire. I was knitting like it was my full-time job, despite the fact that I was also still working my full-time job. It was hardcore. So the process is definitely affected by the timeline, but also it is just because of the brioche, it just is a bit of a more tedious knit. It just takes longer to get the same amount of fabric done at the same time. It looks so good. Like, it's so worth it. Like, the payoff is there. You just really have to work for it. And the cable twists, despite the fact that the individual cables are fairly long, they're offset in like a bricolage. So you're doing cabling on like twice as many rows. Like, you don't have as many nothing rows in between. So I would say my process enjoyment on this was like a 6, but finished object, it's way up there. Like, I was really excited to give this to my sister. It's like, I feel like this came out so nicely. It feels like an impressive knit. Why am I giving this away? I want it. So I think that this is going to be actually tied right up with the Magnolia Bloom. It's a good one. And this now brings us to my first knit of 2025. I finished this in February. This is my Lyon Sweater by Petite Knit. And I can already tell you this one, high on the process scale. I loved this. I started knitting this one when I had started the next one we're going to talk about and quickly ran into an issue that I needed time to resolve, so I shelved it for a bit, pivoted to the Lyon, and it flew. It was such a good reprieve. It was process, I can already tell you, is a 10. And let's go look at our wear stats, but I think this is going to rank high all around, I think, because so this one I've worn 21 days, and so I've had it less than a year now. I only finished it in February, so it hasn't even seen a full winter. Like, I've had it, remember, I'm recording this at the beginning of November, so February to November, we were already exiting the coldest months, and now we're only just starting to head into them. Like, it hasn't actually fallen below 0 yet at the time that I'm recording this. 21 days on its off season sounds good to me. This also got packed for Peru. This is a really good travel layering sweater. It's a good layering sweater in general. It has more positive ease than anything I'd knit before that, so it's very easy to throw on over things. Also, the neck is very open and stretchy. It's very easy to throw on. I love the color palette. The stripes were so much fun. My only qualm about this is that the like reddish orangey color, in my head, I wanted that to be a slightly more red. I still wanted it to be an orangey red, but I wanted it to read more red than orange, and I feel like it came out reading slightly more orange than red, so that's my one qualm, but like, this one's good. So process, again, 10. I feel like finish object, so I kind of wonder if I should have done this as a split hem. I do feel like it can sometimes do something a little funny in sort of like a bubbly or bunching way at the hem. So I think it's gonna be an 8 for me. Loved making it, very happy with how it turned out, but not perfect. Not as perfect as I feel about the process. But so once I was finished that one, I went back to revisit the Colette Pullover by Sari Nordland. So this process was interesting. So the yarn I had in mind for this, I had purchased like months ago, finally got around to knitting it. Come to find out, it's not really the right gauge for the project. I thought it was gonna be, but it was sort of cuspy, and then with how tight I knit, I cannot stretch the gauge of a yarn. If anything, it's gonna come out smaller, not potentially on the larger end. So I quickly realized I was not liking the fabric I was getting when I was matching the gauge, and so I decided I needed to add yarn. I couldn't hold it double because I didn't have enough for that, and it was not available to source more of it. So I ended up deciding to hold it with a mohair to flesh it out and fill in that fabric a bit, but that really changed what I conceptualized the sweater to be. Initially, I was thinking, oh, this cute like lace worky cable sweater, this will be like a summer sweater, because the fiber I was working with, it was like a cotton linen blend. This will be a lightweight, warm weather sweater. The lace makes sense, perfect. And then I really had to pivot my vision for it when I decided I needed to add mohair. I was looking at different options. I tried to see if I could find another like linen or something that would match the color that I could hold with it, but it's such a specific color. The color is what I loved about it, And I didn't want to ruin that by pairing it with something that was going to water down that color or muck it up or skew it more yellow or anything like that. So I decided that as much as it changed the type of garment that it was, I would rather hold it with a mohair that's a perfect match and would allow it to stay the color that I was attached to, rather than keeping it the type of garment that I was attached to. So there was some trial and error here. There was some pivoting here. Also some spending so much more money than I expected to here. So I finished this in March. I have worn it 10 times, which again, because I finished it after winter was really over, and we're not even really into winter yet. So it has not yet even had the season that it thrives in, right? Even like as I'm sitting here at the beginning of November, it's barely fall. Like we had quite a warm September and October. So this has not even yet had its time to shine. I don't really know how to assess its role in my wardrobe at this point, except that I do find, again, as far as things that can be dressed up quite easily, this one is so good. The cables obviously give it a bit of like an elegant look to it. The mohair also kind of helps it feel kind of elevated. So it's a way for me to be really cozy while feeling sort of like chic and put together. So I do appreciate that about it. The one thing that makes it a bit hard to wear sometimes is just the mohair. It's warm, it's toasty. Remember when for like 2 years everything just had mohair in it? It's so pretty, but it really is like, you need it to be minus 20 degrees Celsius every single day. So I do hope that this one will become a bit more day-to-day, just throw it on wearable through this winter. But in terms of having like an event sweater, I really love this one. This one really delivers. I'm a really big fan of it. Again, process was kind of messy, but the actual knitting of it, I really enjoyed this. I found that it was a really high payoff in terms of the cables, like looking, like it's very beautifully cabled. But because they're so long, you don't actually have to do very much cabling. So it just felt like a really high payoff on the cabling front, low effort, high payoff. And it was fun to have the little like lace breaks in between. It gave you sort of sections you were like knitting toward with anticipation in a similar way of when you're knitting stripes. And it felt like it came together really quickly. Did it actually? Yeah, actually. So February 15th to March 19th, like just over a month for me, is pretty fast for a sweater. So yarn issues, I was gonna say aside, but not aside, like accounting for that. But like otherwise it was so great that I think that that still averages out to an 8 on the process scale. And so is that an 8 or a 9? So the other things I have at an 8 are my Fausta, my first Iverson headband, and my Lyon sweater. And my 9s are my Christmas stockings, the Magnolia Bloom, the Minou Cardigan, and my No Frills. I do love it more than my Lyon. I think this is a 9. This is an 8 on process and a 9 on end result. It's a good sweater. I hope that it becomes more day-to-day useful, like I said, but it's a showstopper. To me, like, even if this is something that I wear once a year until I'm 100, worth it. Okay, now that brings us to the Tucker by Alicia Plummer. So I finished this in April 2025, very end of April. And this is a funny one too. I feel like I have so many pluses and minuses in both categories. So process-wise, I really wanted to do a fade between these two yarns. I've been inspired by Sarah Lily Makes, who had done a fade between these two colorways, was obsessed with it. I did find though that the like back and forth, like the micro striping that I was having to do to try to transition between them was very tedious. I think that if I were to do another fade, I would want to do a DK weight fade, so you can do it by actually just holding 2 strands double, like one of each, rather than having to do stripes. So I found that quite annoying, especially on the sleeves, the small circumference mixed with the alternating. I was trying so hard to keep it straight, but I was still getting this really like raggedy underarm that I ended up having to mattress seam all the way up the underside just to hide this like messy guttery effect I was getting. So process was a little bit, and it also just took a long time because it was a fingering weight long sleeve, but it's so useful. Like, I want more fingering weight sweaters, like to have a lighter weight knit that I can just throw on during a wider range of temperatures. I also think the fade looks so fun. I love it as an object. to go back to the poppy tank, like an art piece. It's not super my style. I kind of knew that going in. This was more just like the fade is fun, and I almost thought of it as more of like pajamas in the way that like you might not wear a pair of pants with like Mickey Mouse all over them in daily life. You might wear pajamas like that. So like this kind of fits in that way in my head. How does that actually shake out in my wear stats? I've worn it 11 times since the end of April. So this is, I think, where those two things meet, the usefulness versus the personal style. Because I think that anytime I put it on, I've been like, wow, this is such a perfect weight of knit. But I also just don't always reach for it. Also, the sleeves somehow ended up being kind of too short, even though it seemed like they were gonna be too long. They really like snatched up. This is one where I really actually want to unpick the bind off and just knit the cuffs longer. And I think once I do that, it will become even better to me, but I need to convince myself to do it, much like all the other things on this list that I need to do. So where does this fall? Process enjoyment, not high. I think like a 5. Is it worse than that? Is it a 4? I was pretty fed up with this by the end. I literally titled, I think, one of my videos in a fight with my fade whip. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a 4, but I do think the FO is a 7. I think it's gonna be right there with my Snuggly Socks. And when I am making the nice clean version of this that you're looking at, I'm gonna have to make some tough calls. I don't think I'm gonna let anything sit exactly on top of each other. I'm gonna force one or the other to be higher or lower or further over than the other. So you will know better than present me does about my final verdict. All right, next up, my Serendipity Sweater by Knitting for Breakfast. So I finished this May 26th of 2025, so it hasn't had a lot of time, and I mean, that's really supported in the stats. I have worn this 0 days. Here's where I'm giving it a little bit of slack. So finished at the end of May, filming this beginning of November. In my head, this is like a cold spring sweater. This is like an Easter-ish time of year sweater. And that time has not yet existed since I finished it. But also, should you just not have sweaters that are that limited when you wear them? But I loved making this one. Oh my God, it was so much fun. I was so obsessed with it. It's a stranded colorwork sweater. Again, it hasn't been cold since I finished it, but I also feel very aware that it doesn't feel autumnal even. I don't even feel like if it were super cold today that I know that I would have wanted to put it on. Something about a circular yoke just reads very winter to me most of the time. It's rare to me. It has to, I think, be in a very aggressively autumnal color palette to feel autumnal to me. It just feels like it's too soon for a circular yoke. But I think I really need to try to push my brain out of that because I would like to wear it. I love this sweater. Process enjoyment, 100% a 10. I was obsessed with this. Like, I knit this so fast. I knit this in like 3 weeks. Unheard of for me. And like, I remember being obsessed. I was like, when can I be done work so I can work on it? Finished object. Again, I love it as an object, as a sweater in my wardrobe, TBD. So I think to be reasonable, I think we need to put it below the Lyon. I think it's a 7. Is it not reasonable to put it at a 7? Because I've literally never worn it since I finished it. I don't know. Maybe I'll wear it a lot. I don't know. I think it's I think it's that thing again where like I'm not sure it fits super easily into my personal style, but I like it. Maybe it needs to be a 6.5. Maybe that's more realistic. Don't want to because I love it so, like, it just was so fun to do, but I think if I'm honest, but Magnolia Bloom doesn't get worn a lot and it's up there. I'm in the bargaining phase of grief here. No, I think it's a 7. I think it's a 7. We're gonna move on. Okay, next up, our Lakes Cardigan by Ozetta. We finally arrived. So I finished this in July of 2025. So I have had this for almost 6 months now, but again, not a lot of cold months, but cardigans, super useful in transitional weather. Who knew? Like I really could have been knitting more cardigans this whole time. There's something about the like knitting flat of it all. And I talked about this when I was first deciding to knit this, that there was a time in my life as like a teenager where I wore a lot of cardigans and I just really struggled to envision cardigans that wouldn't make me feel like I was once again 14, like just a past version of myself that felt weird to like cosplay as. But I mean, really, like I was wearing one style of cardigan back then because that was a million years ago. And cardigans look different now, and there are also different styles of cardigans to choose from. So there are some that I would still avoid for that reason because they just feel like a dated version of me. But like, this is not at all the kind of cardigan that I would have worn then, and it's really useful. I've worn this at least 19 times since I finished it. I imagine it will only continue to get more wear through the winter, though I did get lots through the summer, like in the evenings or when you just need to bring a sweater with you in case there's air conditioning or whatever. Found it super useful because it has the impression of being such a like neutral sweater, but I love that up close it's fun. Like just all the different speckles that made it so fun to work up. It makes it fun for me as a finished object. It's really good. It really satisfies this thing where like I want to knit with fun, interesting colors, but sometimes you just need neutrals in your wardrobe. So this really did a great job of covering both, but like kind of tricking me into knitting a neutral while still making it fun. However, speaking of fun, this pattern was way more finicky than I expected it to be. There was so much more stopping and cutting of yarn and picking up stitches and short rows here and short rows there and short rows everywhere. I really just kind of thought it was going to be a very simple boxy sweater, and it was super not. So I can't say that I enjoyed the process as much as I thought. Also because since it is knit at, I think a bulky weight, I figured it'll go by so fast, it'll be great. But the problem with pairing that with the finickiness was that I never got to settle into just do this for a long time for very long at all. Because it was like you knit for an hour and now you have to like follow instructions for the next part because now you're at a whole different section. So I would say process enjoyment on this. It was really fun to watch the Nora Madara yarn knit up. So I would say, I think this is a 6 on process. Finished object though, my one kind of gripe with this is, well, it sort of is and it sort of isn't. You can see how it kind of wants to fall off my shoulder as like a summer slouchy sweater vibe. I like the effect of it when I'm not like, no, but I'm cold though, keep me warm. It's a little bit of A and a little bit of B, but it's a really good sweater. I think we're at a 9. All right, next up is my Ardent top by Kindred Red, which I finished at the end of August this year. Again, it's the beginning of November. I have not had a lot of time to wear this, but how much have I worn this? So I've worn this 4 times, which is not a ton of times, but also like, look at it. It's a statement piece, right? Like this isn't a t-shirt that you bum around the house in. It's an outfit piece. And so the fact that I've made 4 outfits with it in 2 months, really, end of August, beginning of November, I feel pretty good about that. I just think this is so fun. I love it. It feels like something that I wouldn't have thought that I could knit a top that felt like this. And I feel like it came out feeling very polished. Like I think that someone could look at me wearing it and assume I got it at like Anthropologie. Like it just looks kind of quirky and interesting, but elevated. And I really like it. Process-wise, I think it came together faster than I feared that it might. I thought it might feel like it took a really long time because it is at a fairly fine gauge, but it did not. Also knit back and forth, but I didn't mind that. I don't think I ran into any real issues on this one. It's gonna be really funny if I'm sitting here talking about these and like you have watched me talk about them and you're like, wow, you've really repressed part of that project. But I feel like this one was good. I want to give it a 7 on process. And as far as finished object, I really like it. I'm really happy with it. How happy am I with it? Am I Fausta and Lyon and Iverson happy with it? Or am I Barnsley No Frills Colette Lakes Cardigan, Magnolia Bloom Minou Cardigan, Christmas Stockings happy with it? There's a lot of 9s actually. That's really nice. That makes me feel good. I like things I knit. That's nice. Isn't that nice? What am I ranking again? My Ardent. Okay. I got so distracted by all the knits that I ranked a 9. I don't know. I feel really good in it. Does it lack wearability? But my Magnolia Bloom lacks wearability. It's not because there's anything wrong with it. I docked my Squiggle Sweater on wearability because it was because of like an issue with it, right? Because the neck is too tight. It's like a problem. There's no problem with my Ardent. It's just a specific occasion top. This is where I need so many more axes. Just like the utilitarian versus the like affection You know, we're gonna take the coward's way out. We're gonna split the difference at an 8.5. Okay, this brings us to our final piece, which, hallelujah, because I've been recording for 3 hours. I really had no idea how long this was gonna go, again, because I didn't like do notes or anything ahead of time. So I was kind of like, this might end up being a really short video. 3 hours later. So the next one, my Rivendell by Sari Nordland. So this is my most recently finished project. I finished this October 24th, so like a week ago from this moment, and process. This one felt similar to me to work on to my Barnsley sweater. They both have this like fine all over texture that makes it a little bit tedious to do. I mean, this one did come together a lot quicker than that. This one was September 4th to October 24th, so it was like a month and 3 weeks-ish rather than 3.5 months for the Barnsley. So I've definitely just gotten quicker at knitting in that time. I think that that's mostly what would account for that difference, except that also my Rivendell is cropped, whereas my Barnsley is not. It is quite nice and long, so that would also be a difference. I found it really fun to see the V-neck come together. I got the cable and textury stuff repeat down pretty quickly, so I didn't feel really tethered to a chart while I was working on it, which was nice. But it did still take a bit more like mental energy. But I liked working on this one. I was a little bit nervous about the alpaca of it all because I was getting a lot of cautioning around ways that might like change unexpectedly in blocking and through wear and things like that. But I feel like I liked working on this one. I just was kind of ready for it to be done with all the texture. So where did I rank my Barnsley? That's funny. It was a 6.5. I was just thinking, is it a 6 or is it a 7? So I think we're gonna be a coward. We're gonna say 6.5. And finished object enjoyment. This one is a real mix. I can't really factor in any sort of wear stats because I just finished this, but I do really love it, just a sort of general essence, because I knit it out of the yarn that I bought on my trip to Peru at like an alpaca farm. So I got the alpaca wool at the alpaca farm, knit my alpaca sweater. It all felt very nice and like a way to use that and like kind of make my own souvenir from the trip. That was really, really nice. It feels very meaningful. The color of it reminds me of the Andes Mountains. It's a really good like souvenir piece. I really like the color. I don't really have any idea yet as far as wearability and also as far as how the alpaca is going to drape over time, which makes this one really hard to pinpoint finished object. But I feel like right now, ooh, how do I feel about this right now? I like that it feels like a very different style than my other sweaters. Like the V-neck feels very dramatic and different. My one qualm with wearing it does kind of keep wanting to sit farther back than it should for some reason. So the V-neck ends up kind of shallower than it should be, and it kind of like gives me like a cold back a little bit at the back of the neck. Wearing wise, it's not like absolute top tier, but I do really love it, and also just the souvenir of it all. So I think I'm gonna put it at an 8. Okay, that's it. We have done our scatter plot, I believe it's called. Again, you're gonna be seeing a much nicer version of this, but it's nice to me to see that this is really all quite clustered in the top right corner, which is where you want to be, right? That's where things are that were fun to knit and that I like how they turned out. I mean, we have a few stragglers for sure, but also most of these are things that I knit a while ago. Like the worst thing that I knit recently was on the process front. My fade was my least favorite process, but I was quite satisfied with how that turned out. Like I haven't knit one that was low on both counts in like 2 years or more. I feel like that tells me I am getting better at picking patterns that A, I will enjoy knitting, and that B, I will enjoy what they look like. And if I don't get both of those, I will at least get one of them and I can sort of knowingly go into a project with that, because there have been cases here where I was doing that and I knew that. And I think that that's fine, right? I don't think that every project has to be the absolute most practical and the absolute most fun to knit. I think that it's okay to sometimes just want to have created a specific thing, and sometimes it's okay to make something just because you think it's going to be fun to make it, or you're really going to love it, even if you don't get the most wear out of it. Because again, we're so often talking with these knits about like, oh, I like knitting because I can make things that are so high quality and exactly what I want them to be and will have more longevity than something I would buy out of a store. So like, if that's true, if these things hold up the way that I think that they will, intend for them to, hope that they will, they've got time, you know? Like again, even if I only wear these things once a year until I'm 100, that can be a lot of wears. So in terms of, I guess, takeaways from this, I don't feel like I need to really switch gears a lot, honestly. I wondered if I might sort of have findings from this that would make me feel like I wanted to really gear my winter knitting plans in a specific direction to sort of course correct for any like sort of common mistakes that I've been making, but I really don't feel like there have been. I feel like things have been going pretty well. Like some of the lower ranked, more recent things like my Tekla top, but that also, even that was like over a year ago. I definitely feel like with each project, I have learned more about what I enjoy knitting, what I don't enjoy knitting, and what I enjoy wearing that I've knit and what I don't, right? And so with every project, I think I get closer. I improve my average, I guess, on how these things turn out. It is true looking at this that all of my sort of highest, like closest to that top right corner, those are almost all more recent knits. So we're moving in the right direction. I kind of expected to be like telling on myself a little here and doing this graphing, but I feel like this turned out really well. I'm really curious to know, like, how do you think yours would go if you were to do this? Or if you actually want to do it, please, by all means, I would love to hear. And also if you would use the same two axes, or if you would change your criteria a little, how you would like to examine your knits. Please let me know your thoughts about ranking your own knits. And if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you already have, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.